From necrophile wizard hangouts to vampire fight clubs where people are fed to demon dogs, these are the most disturbing locations in Skyrim. Abandoned house. You walk into Markarth looking for a nice place to rest, and some kid tells you about an abandoned house that nobody will touch. Already a red flag, but you're the Dragonborn, so naturally you kick the door open expecting maybe some rats or a hostile vagrant. Instead, you find a murdered family frozen in time, blood still pooling on the floor, and then the house starts haunting itself. Chairs stacking on tables, doors slamming shut, and a Daedric prince deciding you're the perfect candidate for his next torture project. This is the House of Horrors quest, and it's Molag Bal's personal playground. The family was systematically slaughtered as a ritual sacrifice to the Daedric prince of domination and enslavement. You can see where each person fell, and the environmental storytelling doesn't need dialogue to tell you these people died terrified. The mother clutching her children, the father trying to protect them, all frozen in their final moments, while Molag Bal watched and enjoyed every second. And here's the best part. He wants you to finish the job by torturing a priest to death with a rusty mace in the same basement where the family died. The quest literally forces you to beat a man until he's almost dead, resurrect him, then beat him to death again. And your reward is a legendary weapon that absorbs health and stamina while filling souls. It's a video game teaching you that divine artifacts come from participating in divine atrocities. But the real horror is that Markarth has a whole abandoned house in the middle of the city that everyone knows about, and nobody does anything. The guards won't investigate, the Jarl won't cleanse it, and the citizens just warn their kids to stay away, like that's somehow good enough. It's been sitting there for years, a festering wound in the city that everyone pretends doesn't exist, because confronting it would mean admitting their gods are sadistic monsters who torture people for fun. And once you complete the quest and walk out with your new murder mace, the house just sits there empty again, waiting for the next adventurer to stumble in and learn what divine intervention really looks like. But here's the thing, if a Daedric prince can torture an entire family in the middle of a city, what happens when there's no city at all? Because what comes next proves isolation doesn't protect you, it just means nobody hears you scream. Frostflow Lighthouse. You see a lighthouse on the northern coast and think maybe there's a quest or some loot worth grabbing. You walk inside and immediately notice it's too quiet. No NPCs, no dialogue triggers, just items scattered like someone left in a hurry. Then you find the journal. A Redguard family moved here to run the lighthouse as their fresh start, a quiet life away from the chaos of Skyrim's civil war. They were happy. They had plans. And then the Falmer came. The journal entries document the family's slow realization that something is living in the caves beneath the lighthouse. Strange noises, missing supplies, and then the attacks start. The father fights to protect his family while his wife and daughter hide, but it's not enough. You find the daughter's body torn apart by Chorus, the mother dead from Falmer arrows, and the father's final journal entry reveals he killed himself rather than let the Falmer take him alive. He writes that death is better than what he saw them doing to bodies in the caves below. And then you go down into those caves and find exactly what he meant. A Chorus nest built from human remains, Falmer dragging corpses to feed their giant insects, and environmental clues that suggest the family wasn't the first to die here. The Chorus are particularly disturbing because they're the result of the Dwemer feeding poisoned fungi to enslaved snow elves until they devolved into blind, cannibalistic monsters over generations. So the family died to the living consequences of ancient genocide, a horror that's been fermenting underground for thousands of years and occasionally crawls up to the surface to remind everyone that Skyrim's history is built on atrocities nobody wants to remember. The Falmer don't kill you because they're evil. They kill you because their entire existence is suffering, and they've forgotten what it means to be anything else. And here's what makes Frostflow so effective. There's no quest marker, no reward, no achievement for clearing it. It's optional suffering that you only experience if you're curious enough to explore a random lighthouse. Bethesda put full voice acting and a complete environmental narrative into a location that most players will never see, which means the horror exists whether you witness it or not. That family died screaming in the dark, and Skyrim doesn't care if you ever know about it. But at least the Falmer are monsters who don't know better. What comes next is where human intelligence becomes the weapon, and one house in Windhelm proves that your neighbors might be worse than anything living in a cave. The question is, how long can someone torture people before someone notices? The answer will make you question every NPC you've ever walked past. Skyrim. You walk into Windhelm's most expensive house, thinking you're about to purchase prime real estate, and instead you stumble into an active serial killer investigation where the last victim is still leaking blood blood onto the floor. This is the Blood on the Ice quest, and it's Skyrim's attempt at a murder mystery where the house itself is the crime scene. The previous owner used the house for ritualistic murders of young women, with a hidden altar and journals, Butcher Journal 1 and 2, detailing his kills. The Butcher's victims were all young women, killed in specific ritualistic ways that suggest he was trying to resurrect someone or complete some kind of necromantic ceremony that required fresh corpses. You find journals detailing his experiments, notes on which organs produce the best results, and a workshop where he stored body parts like ingredients. And the city guards? They barely investigate. They post one guard in the graveyard and call it a day, because Windhelm is so busy with racism and civil war politics that a serial killer butchering women is just another Tuesday. What makes Skyrim uniquely disturbing is that you can buy it. The quest ends, the killer is dealt with, and the Jarl offers to sell you the murder house at a discount because apparently property values plummet when the master bedroom has a permanent blood altar installed. You can clean it up, move in, adopt children, and sleep in the same room where multiple women were tortured to death, and the game treats this as a normal housing option. No unique dialogue, no haunting consequences, just congratulations on your new home. Try not to think about the bones we found in the walls. The bones in the walls aren't metaphorical, by the way. The altar is built into the architecture, which means the killer had to extensively renovate the house to accommodate his murder hobby. He was sawing through support beams and installing ritual stones while his neighbors went about their lives, and nobody noticed or cared. Windhelm's entire social structure is so broken that you can run a multi-year murder operation in a residential district without raising suspicion as long as you keep the screaming to reasonable hours. But serial killers work alone, hiding their crimes behind locked doors. What if they didn't have to hide? What if they built an entire society around torture and made it entertainment? Keep that thought, because the next location is about an entire culture that turned suffering into a spectator sport. Bloodlit Throne. Bloodlit Throne is a vampire lair accessed via Dawnguard Radiant quests, filled with thralls and vampires in a ruined fort. The throne room is the centerpiece, where the vampire leader watches fights from a raised platform while thralls in cages beg for mercy or release. You can see the torture devices they use to break captured humans, the feeding pens where they store victims, and the blood pools where they dispose of bodies that are too damaged to be worth drinking from. And here's the thing, the thralls are regular people under magical domination who are fully aware of what's happening to them but can't stop obeying commands. So when they're fighting deathhounds, they know they're going to die, they just can't choose to stop fighting. The deathhounds themselves are horrifying because they're not natural creatures, they're dogs that vampires have fed their blood until the animals mutated into something else. The process is described in vampire texts as requiring the dog to die and resurrect multiple times, each death corrupting it further until it becomes a demon-dog hybrid that feels no pain and exists only to kill. So the vampires are torturing humans and their pets into weapons, because why stop at regular cruelty when you can innovate new forms of suffering? What's worse is that Bloodlet Throne is optional content. If you don't join the Dawnguard, you'll never have a reason to go there, which means this entire operation runs indefinitely in the background of your playthrough. Thralls die in the arena, vampires bet on the fights, deathhounds get blooded, and none of it stops unless you specifically decide to interfere. Skyrim has a functional torture economy happening in real time, and it'll keep running forever unless you personally shut it down. But here's what's worse than supernatural monsters: regular humans who choose to become monsters. And I'm not talking about metaphorical monsters. I'm talking about a wizard who got expelled from a school that barely has ethics for crossing lines even necromancers won't cross. The question is, what experiment is so disturbing that it makes the College of Winterhold draw the line? You're about to find out. Ingvild. You find a frozen barrow on the northern coast that looks like every other Nordic tomb, so you expect Draugr and some loot. Instead, you find a necromancer's ghost harem, and I wish I was exaggerating. The barrow is home to Arundel, an Altmer conjurer who experimented on corpses in ways that violated even basic ethics, which is impressive considering the college barely has ethics to begin with. So he moved to Ingvild and continued his research, which involved killing women, reanimating them as ghosts, and keeping them as his undead companions. The journals you find document his descent from academic curiosity to full necrophilia. He starts by experimenting with different resurrection techniques, moves on to trying to preserve consciousness after death, and eventually admits he's keeping the ghosts around because he's lonely and prefers dead women to living ones since they can't reject him. He writes about how peaceful it is to have companions who can't leave or judge him, and how he's perfecting the technique of creating ghosts that retain enough personality to be interesting but not enough free will to disobey. It's systematic dehumanization through necromancy, and he documents it with the detached tone of someone writing a cookbook. The The worst part is the ghosts themselves. When you fight through Ingvild, the female ghosts attack you with frost magic while Arundel's journal entries play in your head about how he collected each one. These were real people with lives and families, murdered specifically for a wizard's experiment in creating the perfect obedient companions. And the game makes you kill them again to progress, which means you're putting down victims who are already trapped in an existence they didn't choose. There's no way to free them or give them peace. You just destroy what's left of their souls and move on. And here's the kicker. If you read all the journals, you learn that the ghosts eventually turned on Arundel. After years of captivity and abuse, they somehow broke through his control and killed him, leaving his spirit trapped in the same barrow with the ghosts he created. So when you arrive, you're walking into a frozen cycle where the abuser is being eternally attacked by his victims, and neither side can escape or die permanently. It's the closest Skyrim gets to depicting supernatural justice, and even then it's just infinite suffering for everyone involved. And here's what nobody talks about. Arundel kept journals detailing which resurrection techniques worked best for keeping his victims aware but obedient. He was perfecting a system, which raises a question. Was he the only one? Keep that in mind, because the next location suggests he wasn't working alone. There's an entire economy in Skyrim that deals in corpses, and what they're doing with them makes necromancy look tame. If you are enjoying the breakdown so far and don't want to miss out on any new releases, smash that subscribe button and hit that notification bell. Mara's Eye. You stumble across a cave system near Windhelm that seems like any other bandit hideout, maybe some smugglers or thieves making camp. You find coffins and skeletons in this smuggler hideout overtaken by vampires, implying they scavenge bodies for feeding. What makes this location uniquely disturbing is the logistics involved. Someone had to coordinate this operation, establish smuggling routes, pay off or kill witnesses, and transport multiple bodies to a remote cave without attracting guard attention. It's organized crime where the commodity is dead people, and it implies there's a whole underground economy in Skyrim that deals in corpse trafficking. The vampires are the customers, but there's an entire supply chain of humans who are willing to rob graves and sell bodies for gold, knowing exactly what the vampires will do with them. And the location itself is unmarked. There's no quest that leads you here, no NPC that mentions it, nothing. It's pure environmental storytelling where you walk into a cave, find crates full of corpses, and have to piece together what's happening based on context clues. Most players will never find Mara's Eye, which means Bethesda built an entire corpse trafficking operation into the game that exists, whether you discover it or not. It's horror through implication, where the real terror is knowing these systems operate in the background of Skyrim's world, regardless of your awareness. But organized crime makes sense. There's profit, there's motive, there's logic. What doesn't make sense is when institutions places meant to educate and protect become accomplices to horror. And the College of Winterhold isn't just guilty of negligence. They're actively enabling it. The question is, how many students died before the college decided that was an acceptable number? The Midden. You join the College of Winterhold expecting magical academia and maybe some questionable experiments, and the college delivers by having an entire underground complex filled with failed student projects and forbidden research. The Midden is where the college dumps everything that went wrong: botched summonings, unstable enchantments, experimental creatures that didn't survive, and the occasional student who pushed too far and became part of their own experiment. It's a magical graveyard where ambition goes to die, literally. The deeper sections are especially disturbing because you find evidence of systematic experimentation on living subjects. There are cages that held creatures during testing, altars where students practiced necromancy and Daedric summoning, and bone piles from experiments that required multiple corpses. One of the most famous encounters is the Augur of Dunlane, a former student who attempted to achieve magical enlightenment by becoming pure energy, and succeeded. But the process destroyed his body and trapped his consciousness in a sentient ball of light that can't move or interact with the world except through cryptic advice. He's been stuck in the Midden for years, fully aware and unable to change his situation, a living warning about what happens when magical ambition exceeds common sense. Then there's the Atronach Forge, a Daedric crafting station hidden in the deepest parts of the Midden that lets you summon Daedra and create enchanted items through ritual sacrifice. The college knows it's down there they've known for generations, and they leave it accessible because academically valuable research is more important than student safety. Students have died using the Forge, and the college's official response is to tell people not to go down there rather than actually sealing or destroying the dangerous magical artifact in their basement. What's worse is that the Midden connects to the rest of the college through multiple access points, which means students can wander down there accidentally while exploring. There's no security, No magical wards preventing access, just signs that essentially say, "Don't go in the bone room," and a hope that curiosity won't kill anyone this semester. And when students inevitably die in the midden, the college just adds their bodies to the pile and tells the next class to be more careful. It's institutional negligence on a magical scale, where the pursuit of knowledge justifies any amount of collateral damage, but at least you expect horror in a basement under a magic school. What you don't expect is to find it 30 feet from the main road, disguised as your friendly neighborhood grandmother. And here's what's terrifying. If she can hide in plain sight, who else is hiding? Keep that question, because the answer is, you'll never know unless you start breaking into every house in Skyrim. Anice's cabin. You're wandering through the forest south of Riverwood when you find a cozy little cabin with an old woman tending her garden. She seems friendly enough, maybe a lonely grandmother living off the land. Then you go inside and find the trap door to her basement, and suddenly friendly grandma becomes a hostile witch who tries to murder you with fire spells for discovering her secret. Down in that basement is a full alchemy station, shelves of rare ingredients, and a letter revealing she's been using the cabin as a cover for decades while practicing witchcraft and possibly worse. The letter is from her sister, another witch named Moira, who runs a Hagraven coven, and it references the old ways and maintaining appearances among the humans. This implies Anice is part of a larger network of hidden magic users living among regular citizens while practicing forbidden rituals. And the cabin's been there for years, right next to one of Skyrim's main roads, with travelers and adventurers walking past daily without realizing there's a witch living 30 feet away from them. What makes Anice disturbing isn't the witch part. Skyrim has plenty of hostile magic users. It's the deception. She built an entire false identity as a harmless old woman, maintained that cover for decades, and successfully integrated into Skyrim society while conducting magical experiments in a basement that's accessible through a trapdoor she disguised as regular flooring. She's proof that anyone in Skyrim could be hiding something horrific, and you'd never know unless you literally broke into their house and searched the basement. And here's the thing, if you don't find the trapdoor, Anice never becomes hostile. You can walk in, talk to her, leave, and never know she's a witch. The horror only exists if you're nosy enough to search her house thoroughly, which means most players walk past Anice's cabin without ever discovering the secret. She continues her work, maintains her cover, and proves that Skyrim's most dangerous residents are your neighbors. And think about this, Anice maintained her cover for decades, which means she watched travelers pass by daily, probably helped some of them, smiled at children, played the perfect neighbor while running experiments in her basement. She perfected the art of being invisible. But hiding in plain sight is one kind of horror. What comes next is about the horror of being completely exposed vulnerable in an environment designed to kill you. And most players will never experience it because the thought of drowning in darkness isn't fun. But Bethesda built it anyway. Pilgrim's Trench. You find a shipwreck off the northern coast and think maybe there's some underwater loot worth diving for. Then you realize how deep it goes. Pilgrim's Trench is an underwater canyon filled with sunken ships, and diving to the bottom requires careful management of your breath or a water-breathing enchantment because the game lets you drown, and it will absolutely let you drown in a dark underwater cave where you can't tell which direction is up. The environmental design is deliberately disorienting murky water that limits visibility. Corpses floating at different depths, and the constant pressure of your oxygen meter ticking down while you search for loot. The ships were attacked, likely by a combination of weather and underwater creatures that turned the trench into a maritime graveyard. You can find skeletons still clutching weapons or steering wheels, frozen in their final moments before the water took them. What makes Pilgrim's Trench uniquely disturbing is the helplessness it creates. You're swimming in three-dimensional space with limited visibility, trying to loot wrecks while your breath meter drops, and you're not entirely sure you can find the surface before drowning. The game's normal combat advantage disappears underwater. You can't use most weapons or spells effectively, and if something attacks you, your options are limited to swimming away or hoping you can kill it before your oxygen runs out. It's survival horror through environmental limitation, where the location itself is more dangerous than any enemy. And here's what gets overlooked. Pilgrim's Trench is completely optional. There's no quest that requires you to dive there. No unique items you can only get from those depths. It exists purely as environmental storytelling about the dangers of Skyrim's northern waters, and most players will never experience it because swimming to the bottom of a dark trench to loot corpses doesn't sound fun. But Bethesda put full underwater navigation and drowning mechanics into a location that exists primarily to make you uncomfortable, which means someone on the development team specifically wanted players to feel vulnerable and afraid in deep water. But natural death is mercy compared to what comes next, because the final location proves something worse than all of this. That the most disturbing horror in Skyrim isn't supernatural, isn't magical, isn't cursed. It's just business, and business is calculated. Keep that in mind, because when you see what these people planned not for revenge, not for madness, just for profit, you'll understand why Skyrim's real monsters look exactly like everyone else. Broken Ore Grotto. You investigate a cave on the northern coast and find a group of pirates who seem like standard bandits, hostile NPCs guarding a hideout. Then you find the planning room. This Marauder Cave is tied to the Lights Out quest, where pirates plan to sabotage the Solitude Lighthouse to lure and loot shipwrecks. The dialogue between the Marauders reveals they specifically target families and isolated homes because resistance is lower and the screaming attracts less attention than raiding a town. They discuss using fire to force people out of buildings, how many men are needed to overwhelm a typical household, and what to do with survivors. And the answer is always, kill them, because witnesses cause problems. It's systematic murder treated as business logistics, with the pirates calculating civilian death tolls the way merchants calculate profit margins. What makes Broken Ore Grotto worse is the tangential connection to the Lights Out quest. If you help a pirate sabotage a lighthouse beacon to cause shipwrecks, the marauders at Broken Ore are likely part of the same operation, luring ships onto rocks, killing survivors and looting the wrecks. The quest presents this as a morally gray choice about helping a desperate man, but the environmental storytelling in Broken Ore reveals you'd be enabling mass murder for profit. The shipwrecks in Pilgrim's Trench? Some of those are from operations like this, and the grotto itself is flooded, with platforms and makeshift bridges connecting different areas. You fight the marauders in knee-deep water surrounded by evidence of their crimes, stolen goods, blood-stained weapons, and maps of future targets. The environmental design makes you work for every kill, wading through water that slows your movement while pirates attack from elevated positions. It's mechanically and morally exhausting, fighting through a location that exists to show you exactly what happens when people decide other lives are worth less than loot. The worst part is that these marauders are just regular people. No magical corruption, no Daedric influence, no curse driving them mad. They chose to become murderers and cannibals because it was profitable, and they're good at it. Broken Ore Grotto proves that Skyrim's real horror is humans who've decided morality is negotiable. And here's the connection nobody makes. Every location we covered: the necromancer, the serial killer, the corpse traffickers, the marauders. They're all regular people who discovered that Skyrim doesn't punish creativity and cruelty. The guards don't investigate thoroughly. The Jarls don't ask questions. The college doesn't check basements. Which raises one final question. How many more of these operations are running right now in locations you haven't discovered? How many more Anices are smiling at you from their gardens while bodies rot in their cellars? If you enjoyed this video and want to see Skyrim's biggest mysteries explained, click the video on screen.